restless. I am so restless. And this changing world leaves me speechless. I am lost for words, but I kept my nerve.
America is crying tonight. I mean, literally crying.
This was a whitelash.
A pushback against the advancement of African Americans, of Hispanics, of women, of Muslim Americans.
From slavery to, Nazism, we have faced challenges before.
The three issues that he tapped into, trade, immigration, and wars, I think he's on the popular side of. I think the country hates all these wars. The fact we don't have an immigration system that we enforce. Just drive through Michigan, drive through Wisconsin, and you'll see places that are hollowed out. And so Trump said, you know what, I think I can run against this stuff. And he put it together.
Welcome to the Fallen State. I'm Jesse Lee Peterson. It's been just over a year since Donald Trump got elected. And I just have to remind you, I'm still dancing on the ceiling, by the way. The man I'm talking with today predicted very early in the election that Donald Trump would win. It's an honor to have with me Scott Adams. He's the creator of Dilbert and the author of a brand new book, Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter. I first want to ask, how were you able to predict that the president would win, that Donald Trump would win?
Well, the thing I saw was based on my own background as a trained hypnotist. So I learned to be a hypnotist in my youth. And I've been studying the ways of persuasion in all of its various forms for decades. And when I first came on the scene, I started noticing what I thought couldn't be a coincidence, and it turned out it wasn't, which he has what I call weapons-grade persuasion. He knows it from lots of different angles. He, for example, his church when he was a kid, the pastor was Norman Vincent Peale, the famous author of the book, The Power of Positive Thinking. He obviously knows sales, marketing, branding, and these are all the components of persuasion. And when I saw he was bringing the full package, plus knowledge about business and business strategy, plus his gigantic personality and his ability to attract attention, it looked like, I said at the time, it looked like he was bringing a flamethrower to a stick fight, and the sticks did not see this coming.
That's right. When I heard him announce that he was running, and he was so bold in his speaking, I'm going to put a big, beautiful wall around the borders. I'm going to lower taxes and restrictions. And so I thought of it as being just a courageous person. But I want to know, was I persuaded in another kind of way rather than seeing him as a man without fear, a noble person who wanted to put the country first?
Well, I believe his intentions are good,
right,
because it would be impossible to separate, the person's brand at this point, Trump, from the job he does as president. There's no way he can do something that's good for him and bad for the country.
Right, that's right.
Those are connected. So I'm pretty sure his incentive is in all the right places.
Who can be hypnotized? Give me an example of a person or people who can easily be hypnotized.
So a hypnotist can't tell who would be easily hypnotized. The non-hypnotist thinks, oh, I think I can tell I would not be hypnotizable, or my friend has a strong will, so I'm sure that person could not be hypnotized. None of that is a variable that actually matters. It probably has more to do with how willing you are, and then there's just something about the wiring of some people's brains that allows them to go there more quickly. But everyone who wants to be can be hypnotized. It's just a difference in extent. About 20%, say 1 in 5, can be deeply hypnotized until they can experience what's called the phenomenon. Now, the phenomenon would be if you said your hand is on fire under hypnosis and the person actually felt it.
Yeah,
right?
I've seen that.
Right. And when you watch, for example, stage hypnosis,
yes,
part of the magic trick of that, because there is a bit of a trick to it, is that when you have a big crowd, it's easy to find the 1 in 5. The hypnotist would give them a little test. They might say, hold your hands together, and now you can't take them apart. Now 4 out of 5 people will say, I could. But 1 out of 5 will go,
yeah.
And It's the little hesitation that the hypnotist spots and says, come up on stage, and then they do a little further testing, might send a few people back. But you can't know in advance. You have to actually just test it.
On one of your previous books, it's called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. Should people be afraid of failure?
Well, you could be afraid, but it's not going to stop it from happening. So, I would recommend a certain amount of level-headed acceptance that the world is about trying a bunch of things. Most of them don't work. Most of the people you ask on a date, it's not going to become your soulmate. Most businesses don't work out. So I would say just look at it as a system in which the failures are moving you along. If you've chosen your challenges correctly, the worst that comes out of it is you've learned a whole new skill. About, I think, 1 in 20 startups, maybe a little better, will work on the first attempt. In other words, an entrepreneur who's trying for the first time. But when that entrepreneur fails and then tries a second time, suddenly the odds go up to about 1 in 5.
Right.
Because they've learned so much, they've made the contacts, they know what not to do this time.
And how would you define success?
Let me describe what I'll call a perfect life arc. When a baby is born, the baby is perfectly selfish, because it has to be. It can't survive. Things have to be done for it. As you get a little bit older, maybe you can help out around the house, but the kid is still a selfish creature and needs to be. It needs a parent to help it out. When you become a parent, there's probably a point where you feel you're giving more than you're getting. You're giving to your kids, you're giving to your job, you're giving to your spouse. And then by the time you die, if you've done everything right, in that final moment in your last breath, the last thing you've done is you've given away all your wisdom, all the love, if you have any. We hope you did. And then at your last moment, you give away your estate, everything you've acquired in your life. It's a perfect moment of unselfishness. Not planned necessarily, but if you do it right, your arc has been from completely selfish to completely unselfish. At this point in my life, I say this often, I have the money that I need, but I still work every day. But I don't want to stop because I can feel myself on that path to doing something more useful.
Is that natural for you, or were you born that way, or did you learn to be that way? How did you become the way you are?
It's got to be some combination of those things. There are people, there's an old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Right.
And I look at things like my college roommate, Mike Chorley, completely changed my life by doing nothing but being a good example.
Yeah.
He taught me how to be a man. And there have been other people who, through their acts of kindness, in fact, it was an act of generosity that even allowed me to have a career. It was someone I asked some advice for, another cartoonist. Didn't know him, never met him in person. I wrote to him and said, how do you become a cartoonist? He wrote back and gave me this great advice. And then at the end he said, it's a tough business. You're going to get a lot of rejection, but keep trying. Don't give up. So I tried, and I got rejected, and I gave up. A year later, without any contact with Jack Cassidy, who gave me the original advice, I get a second letter, a year later, just out of the blue. I opened it up, and he said he was clearing his office, and he came upon my old letter, it was still in the pile, and he said he was just writing to make sure that I hadn't given up.
Amazing.
There was nothing else in the letter.
Yeah.
That was it. And I had. And so I thought, well, maybe he knows something that I don't. And that act of kindness, out of the blue, didn't ask for anything, never has, he changed my life.
Our new policy is no drinking coffee during work. That should remove all doubt that our policies are designed for any reason other than evil.
Well, your honesty is refreshing.
Stop ruining the moment!
Are you surprised at how well Dilbert, is it Dilbert?
Yeah, Dilbert.
Yeah, Dilbert. How well that turned out for you and the impact it had upon society?
I too was influenced by Norman Vincent Peale and the power of positive thinking. That was a big influence in my life. And I expect every single thing I do to be a gigantic success.
Really?
Very rarely am I right. Roughly 1 in 10. And the book you referenced, catalogs my 30 or so failures to achieve 3 or so successes that were fairly large.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
I am so excited. I can't believe it. Finally, the TheFallenState merchandise is here. Look at this beautiful shirt. We have red, white, and black. Comfortable, I like the fit. Really nice t-shirts. And we have mugs. The TheFallenState mug. On the back it says, "Did you have fun?" Did you have fun? A gift. Excellent gifts, both. This is a great way for you to help us. Can you imagine your friends seeing you with this at the office, at the park, in your home? You're gonna love it. Order them now. Go to TheFallenState.tv. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hadn't planned to ask you this, but listening to you talk, do you believe in God?
I'm not a believer. I'll tell you if you'd like, I'll tell you what I do believe.
Okay.
There are folks who say that we might be a simulation, and here's the idea. In our lifetime, we will probably be able to create simulated computer-generated people who act and believe, in the program sense, that they are real. We can almost certainly do that in our lifetime, and if not our lifetime, the one after for sure. What evidence do we have that someone hasn't already done that and we are the simulation? And the argument is that for every original species, there will be lots of simulations eventually. So just from the odds of the math, it's far more likely that we are created by some larger power, but it might be just another civilization that learned how to make us. So there's a longer discussion of that, but that's the bottom line. It's just based on math.
And so did you grow up thinking that way about life, or at one time did you believe in God but realize that wasn't?
So I did go through I went to Sunday school in the Methodist Church. I went through that. But about at the age of 11, I'll tell you what took me off the trail was the Jonah and the whale story.
Yeah.
And I was sort of a calculated, logical kid, and I was like, I don't know, this part I'm not buying, and then that caused me to drift away from the rest of it.
I still wonder about that too. Positive thinking. I don't know how to make myself think positive. And I forget, like if I'm gonna do something, I forget to remember it so I can repeat it so that it can happen. Is there a way to make yourself think positive?
Yeah, there are two things I would suggest. The first thing is that we artificially imagine there's this distinction between brain and body. And what I find is if your mind isn't where you want it to be, and you know it, if you do something with your body, which is exercise, eat right, be with the person you love, if you just make your body do those things, the brain will follow.
Right.
But on top of that, and I think this would be the Tony Robbins approach, if you just mechanically repeat to yourself positive things, you can reprogram your brain even though you're not believing it as you say it. So the believing it is not part of the active, it's just not active. It's the actual mechanics of saying to yourself, I feel good, today's gonna be great. If you just repeat those things, it becomes real.
That's amazing. I don't know if it's a problem or not, but with me, my thinking seemed to be outside of my brains. Like my brains seem to be making my body function, but the thinking seemed to be not inside the brain, but outside, and it guides me. I mean, if I follow it, it'll guide me to do what seemed to be right or what seemed to be wrong, and it always turned out wrong.
You mean in a spiritual sense it's coming outside of your mind? Say more about that.
Like, how do I explain it? The things I do in life, I would never have thought of doing those things.
Oh, interesting.
And so while I'm doing these things that seem to be natural to do, my mind is trying to tell me to go a different direction with those things. And because I don't trust the thoughts or the mind anymore, I just go the way I see to go, what's in front of me, and that seemed to work better than trusting what the mind is telling me.
Yeah, I think, I'm not positive about this, but I think hundreds of years ago, or maybe thousands, people thought that the little voice that they heard in their head wasn't them.
Right.
That because it was almost a language-based voice in their head, that it might be coming from a spirit or God or something. Do you have the sensation, I know I do, that there are actually more than one person in you? You're actually a couple of different, maybe
I
five,
told him had that.
maybe 5 different personalities.
Yeah. And so what are those?
Well, you know, there's the angry me, the aggressive me,
Right.
the happy me, the optimistic me.
So let's say that I decided that I wanted to be a doctor. I know nothing about doctoring, but I see a doctor, I like a doctor, it looks smart, you know, healing people. Can I convince myself to become a doctor?
I think there are some limitations to positive thinking, and I don't want to assume that you couldn't do that.
Right.
But I would think some people can't do that.
What can I absolutely convince myself I can do then, or become?
Well, I usually recommend that people try to persuade themselves in a more general direction as opposed to I want to be a cardiologist, because if you say I want to be successful, I'd like to do it in a communication field or entertainment, that gives you lots of room to play. You can discover things, you can get lucky, you can take a path that wasn't in top of mind.
Do you believe that life has a natural path that is already laid out for us? And if we didn't listen to those things, identities, whatever's in our head, we can easily take that natural path easier rather than try to convince ourselves of anything?
By natural path, do you mean like predetermined?
Yes.
Well, I used to think that, but now I'm a little bit more about the fact that we're interpreting our realities. So I'm not sure that there's an underlying physics to what we're doing. Maybe there has to be, but it feels like we're just interpreting our life, not predetermined.
I'm getting reports that your morale is too high. Happiness is nature's way of informing human resources that you're overpaid.
Nature wants me to be unhappy.
Don't blame me, go yell at the clouds.
In your current book, Win BIGLY, you say Trump is the best persuader you've ever seen in action. Why do you think that?
Well, it's partly because he has what I call an impressive talent stack.
Is he aware that he has that?
Yeah, very much.
So he's very aware that he can persuade people.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote a book on negotiating.
Right, I know.
So yeah, he's very aware. If you ask him, he'll say he knows branding, and you can see it from his, "Make America Great Again" to his, red hats to, I mean, you just see it everywhere from the Trump name. I mean, even his father changed the name to Trump. A word that says success. It used to be some slight drumpf or something, I think originally. So you can see it in his family. You can see him. You can see in his technique. I mean, I could talk about some of the techniques he uses that would be invisible to the untrained.
Yes, tell me.
So the best examples are what I call his linguistic kill shots. His nicknames for people. When people try to do one against him, it's just something that rhymes and sounds funny, but it doesn't stick. Like they used to call him Cheeto Jesus. And that was like bad persuasion because people like Cheetos and they like their Jesus. So it's not exactly the insulting nickname they hoped.
Yeah.
But when he says low energy Jeb, you can never see Jeb Bush the same way again.
That's for sure.
That's a reframe.
Wow.
Right. And it also, it's a magnet for confirmation bias. Anytime you saw Jeb not being excited, you'd say, well, there's that low energy compared to Trump, who was high energy. Crooked Hillary, same technique. In fact, all of his nicknames have the same architecture to them. That's how I know that it's not an accident. That you knew there was going to be something that came up during the course of the long campaign in which somebody's going to say, hey, that thing Hillary Clinton did looks a little sketchy.
Yeah.
So you were just automatically going to be drawn back to that nickname time over time again. And notice how his nicknames can't be flipped to a positive. So somebody tried calling him on the Clinton side. They were thinking, let's call him Dangerous Donald because he might blow up the world. But his supporters say, danger, that's what we want.
That's right.
We want him to beat
That's
ISIS.
true.
We want him to drain the swamp. Let's have some danger. But you can't flip crooked around to a positive. Low energy, there's no positive to
That's
that.
right. You gave another excellent example of that in your book, Win BIGLY, with the Rosie O'Donnell situation when Megyn Kelly asked him about women being fat. Tell the folks about that. I thought that was such an excellent point.
So, and keep in mind that what I'm looking for is consistency in technique. So I'm going to tell you about that one and then tell you how he used the same technique again. So during the debate, first Republican debate, Megyn Kelly said, "What about your comments about women?" And then she mentioned some bad things he said about women. So instead of addressing it directly or apologizing or saying, "Oh, I've improved," which would have been standard political stuff, his campaign would have ended that day.
Right.
Instead, he interrupts her and he goes, "Only Rosie O'Donnell." Giant laugh. Now here's the thing. The people he was trying to convince then was his base, the Republicans. And they did not like Rosie O'Donnell.
Right.
But more importantly, they all knew her and they could visualize her. And it took all the energy from the question, which was damaging, to his answer, which wasn't even an answer to the question.
That's right.
And suddenly the next day, all we're talking about is the answer. You've forgotten the question, right? Not entirely, but enough.
Right, yes.
Same technique when he was on a CNN interview with Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo had this great gotcha question. It was as good as Megyn Kelly's. He said the Pope recently had criticized capitalism. He said, "What do you say to the Pope's comments about capitalism?" Now the trap is, you can't say bad things about capitalism if you're running for president and you're a billionaire.
Yes.
And you can't say something bad about the Pope. What do? What does candidate Trump do? He says, "I would tell the Pope he should worry about ISIS taking over the Vatican." Boom.
That was it.
What was the question? I don't remember. He took us to this visual that's practically ready for a movie. You could see them coming over the wall of the Vatican,
Yes.
with their swords and guns and stuff. And when you see he can do it more than once, you see technique. The first time you could have said, "Well, that was a lucky move."
Right.
But you see him do it over
No,
and
he's
over again.
excellent at that.
Yeah.
They are nicknames designed to do more than just nick an opponent.
Lion Ted, Lion Ted. What's your name? My name's Lion Ted Cruz.
From Lion Ted to Low Energy Jeb to
Little Marco.
And now he's got a new nickname intended to torment
Crooked Hillary, Crooked Hillary. We are fighting the fake news. It's fake. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
Help me to understand, why do I see President Trump at what he's doing and the way he functions and the way he lives? It seems to be natural. It doesn't seem to be something that he convinced himself of, but it just seemed to come naturally, as though God gave it to him.
Well, there's definitely a natural component. He's quick on his feet, he's smart, he's comfortable in public. There's some things that you just sort of have to come by naturally.
Right.
But you can see he's also developed all of those things.
Right.
So there's just a ton of technique. For example, when he talks about the wall, think about how that could have been done wrong.
Right.
Somebody said, "Well, we need to secure the border with a variety of different mechanisms depending on the terrain." You would have just said, but he says, not only are we going to build a wall, here's the good part, we're going to make Mexico pay for it. Suddenly, I got to talk about the wall.
I know.
and
That's right.
the technique is to make you think past the sale, of a standard persuasion technique. If you're thinking about, is Mexico going to pay for it, which was never the important part,
right,
you've already sort of accepted that something like a wall is going to get built.
Happen. That's right.
And it's visual, it's making you think past the sale, tons of technique in everything he does.
Did he teach this to his children, or did they naturally pick it up from him?
I assume that they're getting it the same way he got it, because I'm pretty sure he got some of this from his dad, who was a successful business person, and you have to be good at persuasion to reach that level of success.
Have you noticed that they seem to have it too?
They do seem to have it. I would agree that you see the same types of skills coming up, but they also seem to be the adjusted version for
right,
age.
Absolutely.
Where they are going to be at age 70 is going to be even better.
Could anyone learn to do this or become this way, as the president is?
Everybody could learn to be
persuade.
better than what they are, but there are certainly some natural differences. You could be smarter or less smart, and that's going to make a difference. And his willingness to take risks is probably the hardest part to teach.
Yeah.
Because he took a huge risk with his reputation, with his life. I mean, he's literally risking his life.
Yeah.
People have tried to kill him, threaten him all the time.
Yeah, that's amazing.
What can I do? I'm a meaningless statistic. There could just be a way I could help the fallen state I'm not crazy. That's never gonna happen. I'm not living in a dream world.
Well, what's the matter with you?
Jesse? Jesse Lee Peterson? You're my favorite YouTuber, and I wish there was a way for me as the viewer to support you.
You can help us, and you can too. Whatever amount you can afford, even $1, we appreciate it. Go to patreon.com/TheFallenState.
That's amazing.
You say human beings are not creatures of reason, but use emotions to make decisions. Explain that.
Well, we're irrational. If you were to look at, if you imagine that people use facts and reason to make decisions, how can we ever explain that all of our elections for the president end up about 50-50?
Right.
We're all looking at the same stuff.
Right.
A little less so now because of the differences in the network coverages. But we pretty much have the same facts. Consider how many different religions there are.
Yeah.
They can't all be right because
right.
Some of them are mutually exclusive. You can't be reincarnating if you're also going to heaven forever, right? So people are making decisions with the same facts, roughly the same sense of reason, completely different conclusions. We're simply not rational creatures.
Is it true that most of the time, if not all the time, most of the times that you make decisions based on emotions, they always be the wrong decision?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Lots of times your gut can take you to the right place. When I was shopping for a house, I remember walking into it and thinking, facts don't matter. I feel something in this house.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I was totally happy in that house.
I totally understand that. I bought my first house at 25, right? And I have been taught all my life, when you get, finish high school, get a job, get married at 25, but buy a house first. At 25, buy yourself a home, and then get married. So at 25, on the day of my birthday, I had no money. I said, I'm going out today and buy a home. I don't know, I was just taught that.
Did you succeed?
Amazing story. I went and found a realtor. I told her I want to buy a house, but I don't have any money. And she's like, okay, let's look around. We looked at several homes, no money. And finally, I saw the perfect house. I walked into the house and I knew that was going to be my home, my first home, right? So I said, this is it. And she said, well, let me talk to the seller, see what we can do. And the seller said, okay, all I want is for someone to assume the loan. Just take this loan. And I'm like, wow. But I took over the loan, I had my first home.
Wow.
Isn't it like an amazing story?
Yeah, rational thought can only get you so far. There are some things that just don't make any sense.
I know.
I'm only a cartoonist because I did something that everyone I know said was irrational, which is trying to be a famous cartoonist with no practice, like no experience whatsoever.
According to the employee survey, you want fewer benefits.
I don't remember doing a survey.
We polled a random sample.
That seems a bit suspicious.
In other findings, you want more verbal abuse.
I feel like you and I, to some extent, have a common mission, which is I think we're on the border of what I think could be a golden age. If you think about it, if we get this North Korea thing settled, we have all the resources, there are no shortages, we have brilliance, we have the internet, we can connect, we can do all things. I think we're on the border of a golden age, and yet something like 30 to 40% of the country believes it's exactly the opposite, in spite of evidence to the contrary. And I think that people like you and I have some role in helping them see that there's something really good happening here.
You know, in closing, you know what's so amazing to me? I'm watching President Trump over in China, Korea, South Korea, and all the places he's gone. And he's like persuaded everybody. He's persuaded the Chinese.
Yeah.
They're like dancing in the street over this guy. And I'm thinking, do they know what's going on here? And what do you think?
Well, I've heard explanations which sound credible to me, that there's a cultural difference, so that they're not, so that the Chinese, and again, I'm just repeating what I've heard, that the Chinese are not so obsessed with good or bad, it's more about winning and losing, and he represents winning.
Yes, he does.
And that's what they see. So,
he looked like a winner, he sounds like a winner.
He's a rock star.
Even when he reads, he doesn't read very well, but that's okay. because he's a winner. There's something, right? He's a rock star, but he seems to be calm about it. I can tell he's enjoying it, but he still have this personality that is attractive.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody enjoy the presidency the way he apparently does.
Right.
We may learn later that it wasn't what we thought, but who knows?
And then he's tweeting out every morning when I'm sleeping. He's up tweeting. How old is he?
71.
He's a 71-year-old man up tweeting that early in the morning. How does that happen?
And mastered a platform that is a younger person's platform.
Yeah.
Not only mastered it, he owns it practically.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he doesn't exercise.
That part I can't support.
I love this book. Thank you for this book. It really, and I really appreciate the fact, I gotta show the world. He signed it, he drew a little thing, a little Dilbert.
Yeah, that's Dogbert with Trump hair.
My final question, did you have fun?
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much.
Next time on The Fallen State.
Sergio Michel.
I got to high school, I think it was sophomore year, and I got a guitar, and everybody was like struggling to play chords. And I'm like, I'm not gonna play chords, this is where it's at. And I'm like, see that? So I was playing like very advanced guitar solos without even knowing what the name of the notes were. From the get-go, I knew that I had something different. Things came naturally to me. You know what it is? When God gives you a gift, He gives you the concept behind it too, for you to understand.
Thanks for watching The Fallen State. We need your continued support. Donate to my nonprofit here. Subscribe and like the videos here. And tell everybody and their mama about the show.